So, what is a wireless bridge? Well, a bridge connects two LAN segments over a wireless link. And in a true bridge environment, the client devices connected to the client router or the secondary router can only connect with an Ethernet cable. It's very important that you understand that. It's not designed to repeat or retransmit the wireless signal. If you want to do that, we'll talk about that later using a different mode. In this video, we're just going to discuss a couple of wireless modes. Let's look at what those are. Most Tomato mods offer three modes for creating a wireless bridge: wireless client mode, wireless Ethernet bridge, and finally WDS or wireless distribution system. The first two options are the only two options that are actual client modes, and we're going to talk about those in this video. WDS works a little bit differently, and we'll talk about that in another video. The first one that we're going to discuss is the wireless client mode. In client mode, the router connects to the host router just like any other wireless device. So in order to connect, it needs to know the wireless SSID and password of the router that it's trying to connect to. In wireless client mode, the secondary router or client router has DHCP enabled and it resides on a different subnet. The downside to client mode is that it can only pass internet access to devices connected directly to it with an Ethernet cable. This mode doesn't repeat or rebroadcast signal in any way. It just connects wired devices. In wireless client mode, devices connected directly to the main access point will be able to see all client devices connected to the client router. However, devices connected to the client router will be unable to see computers connected to the access point. So this mode might work best if you're looking to share internet access with a neighbor, whereas you can see devices on his network, but he can't see devices on yours. Ethernet mode works very similar to client mode. It connects to the host router just like any other client device. Again, the client router must know the wireless SSID and password in order to connect to the access point. The main difference with Ethernet bridge mode is that the client router is in the same subnet as the host router. Therefore, DHCP is disabled on the client router because the primary router handles the IP addresses for the entire network. In this mode, clients can connect to either router and they'll be treated as if they are connected directly to the main access point. If you're looking to extend the range of your network and keep things fairly simple in terms of file and printer sharing, this is the mode that you want. Okay, what we're going to do now is establish a wireless client bridge between our primary or host router and our secondary client router. The first thing that we want to do is assign a static IP address to our computer that will be connecting to our primary router. And there's a reason that I want to do this, and that is to avoid any IP conflicts. So as you can see, right now I'm connected to the internet, and I'll open the Network and Sharing Center and change adapter settings. And I want to change this for my local area connection. Choose Properties, choose IPv4, choose Properties again, and I'll assign a static IP of 192.168.1.9. And while I'm here, I'll set the DNS server. And that is just the IP address of this primary router. It's the same thing as your default gateway, okay? And choose OK and close. Okay, now let's log in to the primary router and configure it using the default IP address for Tomato is 192.168.1.1. And the default username and password is admin. And by the way, I did a hard reset on both of these routers, so we're treating them as if they're brand new routers. And the first thing that I like to do is go to Basic Identification. And I'll give this router a name. We'll call this ASUS 1 and Router 1. Okay? And I'll click Save. Then we're going to come up here and go to Basic Time, and we're going to change, or rather sync the time. So let's do that now. Whoops, went back on me there. Basic time, there we are. And the time zone, I'm in the Central Time, set to 4 hours. And since I'm in the US, I'll select that and click Save again. And something else I'd like to point out, this is another thing that I like to do during setup, is if I open my network or open my computer and try to browse network locations, let's see, turn on network discovery and file sharing. As you can see, I'm only able to see my computer. No other devices in my network are showing up here. So what I'm going to do is close that out. And in order to make that happen, we need to go into, let me scroll down and go to USB and NAS and enable file sharing. And we'll choose yes, no authentication required. And I'll enable, or it's actually enabled by default, master browser and Wins server. Okay. And we'll choose save again. And now when we go to browse network locations and refresh, it may take a moment to refresh, but we should see our router, and there it is. Okay, so any other devices that you have on your network will appear at that point. Okay, now let's go ahead and click Basic Network. And what we're going to do is set up our client access point, our primary access point. You want to make sure that on the WAN side up here, DHCP is enabled. If you have, I have cable internet, so I'll select DHCP. If you have DSL, you may select PPPoE, and at that point you can enter your username and password and credentials to log in that way. Okay. My default IP for Tomato is 192.168.1.1, and I'm going to leave that as is. The subnet mask can stay the same. DHCP is enabled by default, and I'm going to leave that enabled because this primary router in this configuration is going to be assigning IP addresses to the client device. Okay, so we're going to select. I'll also change this range here to 100. And 149. So now we have a DHCP range of 100 to 149, and click OK. Scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to disable the 5 gigahertz band because we're not going to be using that. Wireless is enabled. We're just setting up a basic access point. We'll choose N only, and Tomato 24 is the wireless SSID. We'll leave that alone. We'll just leave it on channel 6, that's fine. And just to avoid any problems that may show up, I'll go ahead and set this to 20 megahertz. And for security, I'll choose WPA2 Personal with AES encryption. And let's set a shared key of ABCD 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Obviously, you'll want to use something stronger than that, and we'll click Save. Okay, now that our wireless access point has been configured, what we'll do is I'll physically disconnect my computer using the Ethernet cable from this primary router that we're working on right now, and I'll connect it to the secondary router, the client router rather, and we'll configure that in client bridge mode. So I'll see you in just a moment. Okay, what we're going to do now is log in and configure the settings on our client router. I have physically disconnected my computer from the host router and connected it to one of the LAN ports on the back of the client router. So at this point, there's no need to change the IP address of the computer. As I said earlier, both routers are being treated as if they are new, and therefore they're both using the default subnet. So at this point, just to clarify, I am connected directly to the second router that we're going to be using. Okay, and so let's go into the default IP and log into this router here. And we'll use the default username admin, default password admin. And the first thing that I like to do, and this is just a personal preference of mine, is to change the theme. And this helps sort of gives some visual security and helps me prevent from making the right settings on the wrong router. Go to Administration, Admin Access, and I'm going to select a different theme for my client router and click Save. And again, this just helps me to prevent from making the settings on the wrong device. That can be somewhat troublesome when you're troubleshooting. And when this is finished, what we'll do is go in and make some of the same changes that we did on the primary router concerning time and giving it a name. So let's go to Basic, Identification. This time we'll call it ASUS 2 and Router 2. Okay, and we'll click Save. And when that's done, we'll go up here and change the time. Again, we are in the Central Time Zone, and I'm located in the US, and I'll click Save again. Okay, we've made the basic settings so far, but what we're going to do is a little bit different this time. Is we're going to go to Tools and click Wireless Survey and click Refresh. And what this will do is give us let's see if we can find our Tomato 24 network. There it is. And we're using channel 6 at 20 megahertz. Okay, so now let's go to Basic, Network. We can leave DHCP enabled, and we will change this to a different subnet, and we'll use 2.1. We can leave the net mask alone, and we want to ensure that DHCP is enabled because this client router is going to be in charge of the DHCP address range, which we're going to give that now. We're going to use 2.100 to 2.149 and click OK. Okay. Now we'll scroll down. This time I'm going to disable the 5 gigahertz network again because we're not using that. The wireless network for the 2.4 band, we need to ensure that that's enabled. We'll choose wireless client mode. And notice when you select wireless client mode, you're unable to select like N only, and it tends to yellow out. For some reason, in client mode, it doesn't like that, so we're going to choose auto. And the wireless SSID is Tomato 24. And the security, this is where things can get a little tricky if you're having difficulty connecting your client router to your host router. In our client router, you may remember that we used the security type WPA2 personal. Well, for some reason, that doesn't work on the client router. So I discovered that using the WPA/WPA2 personal setting worked just fine. And the encryption type is AES. And the shared key is ABCD1234. And let's just double check our settings. Okay, everything should be fine. And at this point, I'd like to point out we have changed the IP address to a different subnet mask. And in order to connect, we're going to have to change the IP on the computer or set it to automatic because this router is going to want to take control of our IP. Okay. See where it says here? The new IP is in a different range. So while that is resetting, let's change our computer's IP. Open the Network and Sharing Center. Go to Change Adapter Settings. We can right-click and choose Properties. Choose IPv4 and choose Properties again. As you can see, we're still in the old subnet, and that is not going to work for us to connect to this router. So we will choose Obtain Automatically and choose OK and click Close. As you can see, it's identifying the network, and there we are. We are connected. As you can see down here, the client router has successfully connected to our host router, and we can open up a new tab, and there's our search. We could go to msn.com, and we have internet access. So that is how you establish a wireless client bridge using 2 routers with the Tomato firmware. Now that we have successfully established a wireless client bridge between our client router and the host router, we need to see how this affects things in terms of network and sharing. Well, for one thing, as you can see, we are in a different subnet than the primary router. And as a result, when we browse network locations, as you can see, I have the only computer in this network. Well, for one thing, I have the only computer connected to this router. But even so, I still wouldn't be able to see devices connected to the host router. So how can we fix that? Well, we can use the other mode, which is wireless Ethernet bridge. Let's do that now. Let's go back to the router. And this time, pay close attention to the DHCP in the WAN section here. We're going to go down here to the 2.4 wireless area. And this time, we're going to select wireless Ethernet bridge. And when we do that, as you can see, it disables the WAN. And you even have the option to select this checkbox to basically this bridges the WAN port to the primary LAN, meaning, well, essentially it gives you a 5th LAN port. It turns that WAN port into a LAN port, okay? But I'm not going to select that option. The other thing that we need to do with Ethernet mode is we want to get back in the same subnet as the primary router. So we'll select 1.2 instead of 2.1. The subnet mask can stay the same. This time, we're going to disable DHCP. The reason that we're doing that is because the primary router, the host router, will be assigning IP addresses for the entire network, regardless of which router is connected. We'll select OK. Let's just double check everything. Our IPs look good. We have Ethernet bridge selected. And the same thing goes with this mode, the wireless network mode. Even though on the primary router we have N only, we're going to leave this to auto. Okay? And we're going to select save. Okay, as you can see, when the router saves, it's going to be saved back in the same subnet as the host router. Well, you would think that we would have internet access. Unfortunately, we don't. Well, it looks as though we do, but we don't. You can see, there we go. It updated. The reason that we don't is because the IP address is still set in the same subnet. And there are 3 different ways to change this IP. Number 1, we can restart our computer, which isn't really an ideal solution because I'm recording a video. Number 2, we can change it manually, which I've already showed you how to do. And number 3, you can change it using the command prompt. So I'll open the command prompt and type ipconfig/release to release the IP address. Then we'll type ipconfig/renew to renew the IP address. And we should see this change any moment. Now we are connected using a wireless Ethernet bridge mode. So how does that affect our network? Well, let's see. Let's go to Browse Our Locations, select Network. Maybe we need to refresh this. And it should show our router, and there it is. So that's the main difference between client mode and Ethernet bridge mode. So now you know how to establish a wireless client bridge or a wireless Ethernet bridge and the differences between the two. Thanks for watching.